All right, everyone, welcome back to Lost in the 80s with Rich and Brian. Today, going to be talking about a pretty cool topic. We've been talking about this for a while, finally got together and ready to get on air with it, and that is music. So 1980s music is what we're going to be discussing today, just some of the different genres, maybe our memories, certain songs or certain artists make us think of different things, movies, sports, whatever it is. Music definitely had a big impact in the 80s. So, Rich, good to have you here. Go ahead and kind of kick us off with some of your thoughts on the 80s music.
Yeah, and this will be one of my favorite topics we do. I'm a big music person. Music in the 80s, a few things stick out to me, and we're going to dive into some of these in a couple of our segments. But the first one was the 80s are the first time you could be a popular music act, but you didn't actually have to have talent. Like if you look back in the 50s and 60s, like to the crooners and the Righteous Brothers and the kind of Motown Detroit music of the earlier decades, it was all about like vocal talent, arrangements, music, instruments, all that kind of stuff. But something happened in the 80s. Two things happened, really. You had the advent of MTV, which I think came out in 81, maybe. What was the first video played on MTV? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Music killed the radio star, or video killed the radio star. I mean, video killed the radio star. First video ever shown on MTV. Yeah, and so MTV changed it to a very visual thing. Like if you could make a decent song, but you could have a cool video, you could still be popular. And then also, if you remember, that's kind of when the synthesizer style music came out. Like Whip It Good. Whoever was that, Bevo or somebody that sang that? They weren't talented guys. They were weird guys, but they were able to make this kind of sound with their synthesizer stuff. And, other synth groups like Duran Duran was very synth. Aha was very synth. Depeche Mode, those kind of groups. So I think those two things changed. We watched music a lot. And so that's one of my thoughts on music from the 80s is it wasn't just these power ballads and vocal driven Righteous Brothers, Elvis Presley style music. It was more about the video and kind of the production behind it. And then also music of different kinds became popular. And this is probably the first thing we'll dive into. I'm going to kick it back to you, but you really had three, and we're going to take country music, I think, completely out of this because you and I both didn't listen to country music at all in the 80s. I probably couldn't name you one 80s country music song unless it was maybe something my dad liked. But you had very specific pop music, like Michael Jackson, Prince, that kind of stuff. Madonna were all huge pop star. And then you had very specific like rock and metal, like the big anthems and the big hair bands and all that kind of stuff. And then you had hip hop, which was kind of, Run DMC and Beastie Boys and Public Enemy and those things that were kind of rising in the 80s. And I think that was also different for us, right? Is like different moods, different times of day, different people were able to dive very specifically into these different genres.
Yeah. So I mentioned this on one of our podcasts earlier, but I grew up with a satellite. I didn't have cable. Cable did not reach, where we lived. We didn't live in the country, but we didn't live in town. We grew up along a major highway, and so they didn't have the cable set up there. So my satellite didn't get MTV. We got VH1, which is way different. At least back then, it was way different.
Yeah,
it didn't have it had more of like your almost like your mellow type of music. It didn't have like the hard rock. It didn't have any hip hop. It would have groups like Foreigner, Paul Simon,
Journey,
a lot of the movie soundtrack type people. I know I know the movie, obviously The Breakfast Club, but there was a group actually called The Breakfast Club, musical group. And I remember them a lot. Who else would be another one? What is her name? I think it was called Lisa in the Cult Jam.
Okay,
I don't know if you ever remember that one, but that was I think you mentioned videos like my brother and I, we still talk about this. Like we're like, hey, you remember this video? Or, because VH1 had like 12 videos and they literally just played them over and over and over. Yeah. So I didn't get the MTV experience in the 80s, and they wasn't until the early 90s when I had that. But a lot of things that I think about is I think of, just nostalgic memories. And that's what this podcast is in general, but like certain movies and the soundtracks that are in those movies. And I may not know what the song is called. I may not know what the title of the song or the artist may not know who that is, but I can be like, oh my gosh, that song was in Karate Kid, or that song was in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, whatever. I mean, every movie back then had 2 or 3 just, like, major songs that really reflected like, it was easy to tell, like, "Oh, yeah, that" that was in that movie. So, that's a lot of my memories from the '80s music is identifying it with a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can to me, Eye of the Tiger and Danger Zone are kind of the 2 that immediately jump out, right? Like, if you hear I saw a commercial the other day that played that had Eye of the Tiger on in a background. It was like one of those YouTube advertisement, not a real commercial, but Eye of the Tiger was playing in the background, and, like, me and my son both immediately, like, said something about Rocky, like, with Eye of the Tiger on.
Did it
Danger
make you start
Zone
training? Like, did you start running and
I did. I
go
did
to
a
the gym?
montage in my house. There's other like Top Gun had Take My Breath Away too. There's other Footloose. So I have a great story about
Kenny
Footloose.
Loggins. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
one of
Kenny
he had
Log
a lot of good movie songs.
Kenny Loggins was an easy listening, what I don't know what you would classify him as, maybe pop, but, we had the soundtrack for Footloose playing. This would have been, I guess, in '84 when it came out or maybe '85. My grandmother, I've told this before, she has a day she doesn't have a daycare now, she's 91, so that would be crazy, but it was playing in the background, like, all the kids in the daycare were jumping around, to this song, and somehow I was trying to get into the bathroom door and a girl named Stacy Smith was also, like, trying to run past me and get into the bathroom, and she bumped my arm. My hand, like, kinda shot forward, and then she slammed the door, so she slammed my finger in the hinge of the door and did, like I don't think you can see it, it's kinda crooked, and there's a huge scar that runs across here, but she did, like, pretty serious damage, had to go to the hospital while Footloose was playing, and honestly, like, it's one of those core memories because 'cause I'm, what, 6 years old or 7 years old or whatever, I cannot hear that song without it bringing back, like, the trip to the hospital, the blood, like, the whole thing. That is music at that particular moment in '80s music does not sit well with me.
So, was it just like the adrenaline of her hearing Footloose? Is that what did it,
I
or
think I think so, 'cause I mean, it's a pretty peppy song, and the movie itself is, like, about dancing, so I think everybody all of the kids our age were just, like, jumping around, acting like a fool. Yeah, she just, like, overexcited, dove into the bathroom, slammed the door, and my finger was in it.
well, that's,
Then there's, of course, lots
that's
of
too
other
bad.
movie I mean, the Ghostbusters song, Up Where We Belong, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now. I pulled up a list of those are all Don't You Forget About Me from The Breakfast Club, obviously, is also in my top 5 or 6 from that time frame, so I agree, movie soundtracks were incredible.
Yeah. I mean, as far as different genres, like, just starting with rock, and I think I actually mentioned this when we were talking about an episode earlier, but, I mean, all of them. I was a big fan of all of them, but Def Leppard was my favorite back in the day. I know most people feel like they kinda lean toward Guns N' Roses or Motley Crue, even Poison over Def Leppard, but they were my favorite as in that '80s mindset
Big Hair Man.
back in the day. What was your favorite?
I think probably Guns N' Roses. I did not love so again, I was raised in a very religious household, and I listened to this type of music, obviously, like, I knew all the songs because the radio's on, and people don't also remember that, like, at least for me, riding the bus number 7, shout out to, my bus driver, Don. B97 was on our bus, elementary school, junior high, even the last year I went to high school before I could drive. So, a big exposure to '80s music to me was in the bus, like, on the way to and from school, because you didn't have a phone that you could just put some headphones on. Like, if you got a device, and I eventually had a Walkman and had a Discman, but music was not a ever present thing. Like, now I literally have an earbud. I just threw my earbud on the ground, but I have an earbud in one ear pretty much all the time, just because I have some sort of music playing. We didn't have that ability back then. And so you got to hear it on the bus when you were in the car with your parents, and it was usually what they chose. And then if you had a radio or CD player or tape player in your room. And so I heard the hair bands, but because the people I associated with, and certainly my parents, especially my mom, was not going to probably listen to that style of music, I did not know those songs as well until the mid to late '80s when we got MTV. I mean, that was really my first. You come home from school and your parents aren't home yet. I mean, obviously MTV was the first thing I was throwing on.
Yeah, the having the big I mean, yeah, the Walkman was good. The problem is the battery life was always bad. But I do remember sometimes at baseball practice, if the coach would bring one of the bigger box radios or cassette players that probably took what 6D batteries or something,
Yeah, right.
which probably lasted about 45 minutes. But that was exciting, when that music would come on. I remember music like at pool parties, like at the city pool. If there was like a birthday party, or we would have like end of year little league parties sometimes. Like stuff like that was exciting. I remember going to an actual in Terre Haute. There was a station. It was called Power 103, and they actually hosted. They did some sort of I don't know, some sort of promotion where they were like live, like they're with the people at the pool in Terre Haute, Indiana. And I remember you could go up and like request songs, and I just thought it was like the greatest thing ever. I mean, this was probably 1980, I would say 89 maybe. But yeah, it was just like you said. It was now it's just everywhere. There's music, always music going on. But it definitely was a different world back then. And when you
Yeah,
got to
you
have
had
the
to.
music, especially the music you want, that was exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting ready to say. Like, you had to listen to the radio all day. So now I'll be honest, like now in my truck, if on one of my whatever playlist I choose for that day, if a song I really like comes on, I might just, I got a little button on my steering wheel I can hit and it'll go back to the beginning of that song. Like I might listen to a song 2 or 3 times in a row. That wasn't a reality when you're 10 years old in the 80s. You had to listen to the radio. I remember sick days when I would stay home from school. One of my favorite things, besides watching The Price is Right, because that came on in the middle of the school day, was like turning the radio on, taking a cassette tape that I didn't like, and putting pieces of tape over the little holes at the top. Do you remember doing this? And then waiting for a song that you like to come on the radio and recording it. And the only way you could get the beginning of the song is if it was at the beginning of the block that the DJ was going to play, because they would announce what song's coming next. They would say like, coming up next Against All Odds, and then you would know to go ahead but if it was the second song, you would always miss those first few bars because nobody was announcing that second song.
Yeah.
It was just playing right into it. Music was just different. Like the experience of movies is still very similar today as it was in the 80s. We still go to the theater. Now we can watch them on demand at home, but back then you could go to Blockbuster, or if it was me, Full of Pep Video, and rent them. But music is totally different because it's on demand now and it wasn't then. So if you wanted to hear, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say a pretty good section about Michael Jackson. I mean, to me, he was the epitome of music in that time frame. But if you wanted to hear a Michael Jackson song, you might have to listen to the radio for 2 hours. And then when it came on, you'd try to record it if you could. It's just a totally different feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And in his videos, he was I mean, I know everyone knows this, but just when you first saw his videos, like how much different they were than everybody else's. Like, remember the Thriller one originally was like 20 some minutes long, like the extended cut, where it's literally like almost like an episode. So yeah, that was that was good stuff. What would you say your like if you had to say like, okay, this is my excuse me, like this is my go-to, when I'm 10, 12 years old, like this is what I want to hear. This is my favorite.
It was Michael Jackson for sure. I mean, he was, because again, it wasn't something that was on all the time. Some of those deep tracks or B cuts or whatever you would call them now, like I hear songs from the 80s now that I'd never heard before because they just didn't get radio airtime and I didn't buy the album. And the only way back, so I don't think you heard like I would hear music, like I'm going to use Madonna for an example. I never heard a single Madonna song that I liked. I was never going to be like, I'm going to go buy that album. And then maybe if you did hear, Phil Collins or a Billy Joel or whatever, like it was always just kind of a side note. It was only those really big artists, Run DMC, Michael Jackson. For some people, Madonna fell into that category, and then Bon Jovi and those guys. Like I didn't buy a ton of albums, but I bought everything Michael Jackson did. So, Man in the Mirror still to this day is my favorite song of all time. I think it's the best. It's not rated as Man in the Mirror or Thriller is not rated as Michael Jackson's #1 song or Beat It. I looked up a list for this podcast and chat gave me the top streams or top play. Did you know Billie Jean is #1 for Michael Jackson?
I mean, that doesn't really, I mean, it's not my favorite, but I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, it's not I mean,
I mean, that
it is
was
a
a
it's a good song, but
I feel like that was one of his, like, first, like, big hits. I was thinking that
and I
was on
think
his first.
he might have done the moonwalk for the first time
Yeah, that's probably,
live
yeah.
during
Like
Billie
at an
Jean.
award
I
show
could be
or
wrong
something, I
about
think.
that.
Yeah, that's probably right. I don't even I didn't look at years, I just kinda think of, like, time, like, time frames, but, like, MC Hammer, like, was I don't know, did that hit the '90s, or was that
I think
'89?
that's probably a these thing. I don't remember. I can tell you, though.
I associate it, like, when, in the same
I
I
know I
think
was in
about it
junior
based
high.
do what?
I
What
know I
year
was
was
in
it?
junior high. Yeah,
So was it
I
90?
remember let's see. I remember, I remember actually the first time I heard "Too Legit to Quit" and I was doing, like, the hand motions, I was going out for Halloween, and I was in, like, the 7th or 8th grade.
Mhm.
So, it's probably I guess, like, "Don't Touch This" is that what it's called? "Can't Touch This"?
Yes. I
Yeah,
can't believe you just said, "Don't touch this" on
yeah.
you're gonna wanna delete that, I would think, but actually
I'm I'm trying to
leave it
look
on
it
so I
up
can
at
make
the
fun of
same
you.
trying to look it up at the same time I'm talking.
Yeah, "Can't
That
touch
probably
this."
was the tail end of the '90s, I think.
You mean '80s? Yeah, '90,
'80s.
it says 1990.
Yeah,
So it's
so
had
I
I
think
mean
1989 was 88, 89 was his first breakthrough releases with "Let's Get It Started," and then "Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em," the album that had "You
that
Can't
was
Touch
'89,
This," came
right?
out in, '91.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was close to that. I'm trying to think, I mean, it sounds weird saying this, but, like, I thought Whitney Houston was her music was really good, even as a kid, I liked it.
A big MC Hammer fan, but I think, yeah, MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice were right there at the end of the '80s, and I would put those in my if they were in my playlist at that time, they would be, like, on my top 10 most played for sure.
I mean, it was definitely a different type of, if you remember, like, like the whole hip hop thing, it was like, because like, I mean, Vanilla Ice, MC Hammer were technically, I guess, I mean, they were considered rap, but if you remember back then, like like the really, like the parental advisory thing, like they didn't really play that type. Those people weren't mainstream yet. Like,
No, no.
like probably until the '90s, like with Dr. Dre and Snoop and Tupac and all those guys, but like the NWA, um, and even, what was that other rap group called?
Well, there was NWA, there was Public Enemy that was also kind of
Yeah,
but you're thinking of, the one with Luke Skywalker.
yeah, the real, like, back then, at least, like, it was like, they were, like, really vulgar, and, like, that wasn't
Yeah.
normal for music,
Why can't I
and
remember
I
who
can't
that
even
was?
think of their name either, but yeah, that was, that kinda music wasn't mainstream for sure, and then, obviously, with NWA, I
Yeah, I
think
mean, NWA had, like, Straight Outta Compton and Express Yourself. Those songs
that
were
was probably,
late.
like, what, '87, '88,
Yeah,
something like
somewhere in
that.
that area, and then I th this is ano and this is what happens when you start talking in an episode like this, like, you completely forget
2 Live
someone that
Crew.
was
2 Live Crew is what we're thinking of. Yeah.
yes, but DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, I actually liked them a lot. I mean, obviously, Will Smith turned into I would say a megastar, right? I mean, he's probably one of the top 25 most successful people in music/Hollywood history, and then he just cold slapped Chris Rock in
Yeah,
public. But that early music, like Parents Just Don't Understand, Nightmare on My Street,
that was a great song. I still
those
listen
were
to that around Halloween every year.
yeah, Nightmare on My Street's a great song, but he had other do you remember a song he had called Charlie Mack?
I do not.
Char Charlie Mack is the first one out the limo. That was a I
His
really
songs
liked
were
Fresh Prince.
they were always clever.
Yeah, and they kinda told a story a little bit, which I have always I think I maybe have even said that on this show before, like, I always enjoy something that's more than just repeated lyrics. But yeah, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince. I really liked Young MC too. I don't know if you remember him.
He was, Bust a Move, right?
Bust a Move, right? But he also had a song called Fastest Rhyme and another one that was called I Come Off, and those were all
Yeah,
really good songs.
I know that yeah, that one.
But you had Run DMC, you had Beastie Boys, you had LL Cool J, like hip hop probably by the late '80s for me had overtaken, kind of that pop music, Michael Jackson, all that stuff. And I didn't really by the late '80s, I didn't really listen to a lot of what people were calling hard rock or heavy metal or anything like or hair bands or whatever. So I was kind of exclusively hip hop by that time. I mean,
Yeah,
you have Walk This Way, I mean, is iconic. I think, you would have to put that in the top list of any '80s song. And it took kind of Run DMC and put Aerosmith and put those two things together. I still think that's actually an incredible song.
yeah. Yeah, that's when I'd say the late '80s. That's when there started to be like more like collaborating, with like different genres. Well, the whole hip hop thing also that's probably a lot of that has to do with our just where we were in school at that point.
Yeah,
Going into
absolutely.
junior high versus being in elementary school. It's just it was like a cool thing to to know the hip hop songs and to have the albums or cassettes or whatever. I remember always having to hide mine if I had a a cassette tape that had that parental advisory. They made it so they made it too obvious. Like they should have put it like tucked it like in the back, like bottom left hand corner. Like
Yeah, where
have
your
to have a
parent
microphone or a magnifying glass to see it, but it was just
put the
right there.
parental
Like
advisory where
yeah,
the
like do
parents
not
will
let
never
your kids
see it.
listen to this. That's
Yeah.
basically what it said. And yeah, I used to I got in trouble for that quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty smart about that in the fact that of course, you had a locker at school, or at least I did. So by the time I got to junior high, anything I wanted to listen to, like during school, and I did actually. So I'll give you a picture of me in the 8th grade. I was the tallest kid in school. I wore a Bulls starter jacket. You remember like the long stadium ones?
Hmm.
And I don't know if this happened at your school, but at my school, like if you had a really nice starter jacket, because back then starter was not like a Walmart brand. It was like you went to
Yeah.
Finish Line, Foot Locker. If you had a really nice starter jacket, you wore it like all day. It was part of your ensemble. You'd leave it like unbuttoned or unzipped or whatever, but it had a hood on it. And so I had a Walkman by then, and I had a lot of those pirated NWA or Two Live Crew or whatever Public Enemy. I liked Public Enemy. And so I would have the headphones on, sitting in the back of the class with the hood up. I'm like a total hooligan, man, just a total hooligan. And I remember Miss Siegert, if you're listening to this, I apologize. She was not a friend of mine. You failed her class if you got 5 disciplinary marks on the board. And by the end of my 8th grade year, I had 83 disciplinary marks in Miss Siegert's class. And
83.
83, it was terrible, terrible.
It's like
I flipped a kid's desk over one time. I was really going through some stuff
it's
mentally and
because you're listening
spiritually.
to Two Live Crew.
Exactly what it was. It was 100% that, is I was all amped up on hip hop, and then some girl stabbed me in the back with remember those protractors or whatever that had the sharp
Hmm.
point? She thought it'd be funny to like poke me with that, and she made me bleed. So I just turned around and flipped her desk over with her in it. It was like one of those one-piece desks, and I got
Hmm.
like 10 marks for that. So I'd already failed the class just by. So then I figured that's a horrible decision by the teacher, right? Is to like fail me in the second week, because
Yeah.
then I'm just going to let it all hang out all year long. It's going to be horrible.
It's like
Uh,
the Office episode where Jim hits his commission cap. He
absolutely.
tells Gabe, he's like, "I have no reason to sell. Like
Right. So
I can't make any more money."
he
But yeah,
uses the
you can't show
audio
your
book.
hand. Can't show your hand like that.
Yeah, no.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, music is great. I mean, still today, it's a big part of our lives. I mean, even bigger. But I think that when we do hear those '80s songs, it's memories. Remember hanging with your friends at a pool party, sleepover, playing basketball, football, whatever it is, and that the experience of getting that first Walkman or cassette player, the big cassette boombox or something like that. Those are all good memories that we have, and it's easy to smile on those nostalgic type memories. So coming up at the end here, is there any lasting thing you want to add here before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, one you hit on something there that really brought. I do think that this music really was kind of the soundtrack of our lives. Like in a movie, the soundtrack is like playing in the background. It's not always the feature thing, but there's some songs that just the montage is playing, but the music's going on in the background. Overs, I don't know why I didn't hit on this earlier. I had a lot of those, and there was always, some sort of tape player somewhere in the room, even though you're doing other stuff with your buddies. That was a big. So I just think that music now is a bigger part of everybody's life because it's more accessible. But if it makes sense, I think it was more important back then because it was more scarce. Like you weren't
Yeah,
listening to it 24/7. So when a great song came on and you're with your buddies, everybody stopped and paid attention to that. Now a great
yeah,
song can come on and everybody's still just scrolling on their phone. And so I think that was the big difference for me, is music was more important to us then than it is now.
yeah. I see what you're saying. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening or watching, or maybe you're doing both. So we appreciate you being here. Please like and subscribe. Even share if you want to. We would appreciate that. This has been Lost in the '80s with Rich and Brian, and we are out.